And hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge, back once again with another instalment of my Ultimate New 52 reading guide. To provide a bit of background here, I have over the last few years read the entire DC New 52, which was 3,646 single issues. Yes, really, I read every single one of them. And I've used that information to create the internet's most comprehensive reading guide for the DC New 52, bar none. This video series is a result of that, and today's video is video 11.1, the NewStorm. Before we go any further, I would stress that even if you think you know what the New 52 is, or even if you only want to read one specific character or series in the New 52, such as Batman or Superman, you still need to watch the introduction video to this series, which is video 0.0. That video will cover a lot of the broad concepts and principles that underlie the design of this guide, and I won't be re-explaining those points here as I come across them. So if you watch this and see that I mention things in passing, like the convergence line, type J readers, or volumes with big and little V's, and you find it confusing, that's because you need to go back and watch the introduction. And I'll put a link to that video in the description below. So, here is the Ultimate New 52 reading guide, which is the map that I've been using to talk you through all the different issues and series in the New 52. Today's episode is called video 11.1, the NewStorm. Now, in case you're wondering why I'm using that rather odd name, well, it's actually a name that I made up. Unlike the recent videos, the Young, the Dark, the Edge, those were terms made by DC during the New 52 era. But I've actually created a term called the NewStorm, and the reason that I made that, and I've used it for the particular comics I've grouped here, should hopefully become clear. Now, the comics that we're going to be covering in this video and the next video are ones that were sort of scattered across the Young and the Dark and the Edge and so on, but I've decided to group them all here for a reason that should become apparent. Now, before we dive into the NewStorm, I do need to explain what this actually is and where it came from. In other words, buckle up for a history lesson. In 1992, at the height of the 90s comics boom and the rise of the superstar comic artist, some leading creators left DC and Marvel to form their own company. This company was called Image, and is still around today. In fact, Image successfully competes with both DC and Marvel now, and has successfully made the Big Two into the Big Three. When Image initially formed, it contained 6 smaller studios. For example, it had McFarlane Studios doing stuff like Spawn, Top Cow, which was owned by Mark Silvestri, and it also had Wildstorm, which was owned by Jim Lee. And that's the one I want to talk about today. The Wildstorm universe of comics expanded over the next few years, containing such iconic series such as Wildcats, Gen 13, Stormwatch, and DV8. However, flagging sales meant that in 1999, DC bought the Wildstorm imprint out from within Image Comics. The two companies, however, maintained separate offices, and whilst crossovers were both possible and rare, they existed in two completely separate comic universes. By the way, this is why the rare issue 13s from the Marvel 1997 event Heroes Reborn are not recollected in the recent omnibus. They contain Wildstorm characters, which were subsequently bought by DC. I actually did a custom print and custom bind of a Heroes Reborn omnibus myself, where I did include those issues 13, because I think they're a great story. I'll put a link to that in the description below. Anyway, this acquisition by DC led Wildstorm to launch a range of new series. Authority, Planetary, Sleeper, Majestic, the list goes on. There were a series of repeated shake-ups and changes to the status quo year on year, until eventually, in 2010, the entire Wildstorm universe was shut down. Which brings us to the New 52. When the New 52 launched, DC announced that the Wildstorm universe was now being integrated into the mainstream DC universe. A group of new series were launched that featured Wildstorm characters, but now in the DC continuity. Now, if you've been reading along through the comics or watching these videos, you may have noticed hints of this before, and I'm going to list the important ones here. So there's 6 important points to remember. 1, the Wildcats villain Hellspont is a major antagonist in Superman Volume 2, Secrets and Lies. He's sort of scattered throughout the Superman storyline. 2, the Authority spaceship, which is called the Carrier, surfaces in the final crossover events of the Superman family of comics. 3. The Ravagers series, from the Young part of the map, contains Caitlin Fairchild and a Warblade. Number 4. The Wildstorm character Grunge appears in Superboy. 5. The Wildstorm character Zealot appears in Deathstroke. And 6. Midnighter appears repeatedly in the series Grayson, and if memory serves, he is also in the series Batman and Robin Eternal. Now, with that out of the way, the question here is obvious. How much of all the Wildstorm history do you need to know to read these comics? Well, the answer is you can actually get away with very little. The more you know, the more you'll get out of the comics. But actually, there's only 4 critical things you need to know going in to reading the NewStorm and, in fact, reading the New 52 as a whole. They're as follows. Number 1. There are 2 alien races. One is called the Cherubim, and one are called Daemonites. They've been at war for ages, and they're both stuck on Earth. Cherubim are a thinly veiled metaphor for angels in their appearance, hence the name rhymes with cherubim, whilst Daemonites are a thinly veiled metaphor for demons. I know it sounds terrible, this is what often passed for creativity in the comics industry in the 90s. Number 2. The quasi-military superhero group The Authority live in a mysterious giant spaceship called the Carrier, which lives between dimensions in something called the Bleed. It can open teleportation doorways from and to anywhere, as long as the user says the word door. 3. The character of Midnighter is a total badass. And 4. The Cherubim Lord called Majestic is basically as powerful as Superman, although less morally upright, I think is probably the best way to describe it. Well, with that description out of the way and with those points, let's just dive straight into it. Here is the Ultimate New 52 reading guide. Now, if you've been following along at home, which I hope you are, let's just zoom in here and get straight into it. We can zoom into the centre, and we've got a flashpoint there. Above us we have Batman, to our left we have Green Lantern, and these yellow circles here represent what I call the NewStorm. And these are the ones that we're going to be talking through today. So, first up is going to be this series here, Grifter, which is the second one down from the top. I'll zoom in there, you can see the cover, Grifter. This was a series that ran from 2011 to 2013. What we're looking at here is the cover for the trade collection Volume 1, which was called Most Wanted. This collects issues 1 to 8. It was actually a very strong opening for the character and is a good read. If you pan out and then pan up, we will get here to Volume 2. This is called Newfound Power and is much weaker, I'm afraid. It finishes off the story with issues 9 to 16 and issue 0, and that's where the Grifter series finishes. For Volume 2, so the one we're looking at now, Rob Liefeld takes over from the previous creative team, and you can really feel the change in tone and direction. This was, in my opinion, not for the better. So let's zoom out of that. We're going to jump around a little bit, and I'm actually going to go to the series here right at the bottom of the NewStorm now, which is Demon Knight. Now, you're probably wondering why this series, with main characters like Etrigan the Demon, Madame Xanadu, and Shining Knight, is here and not in the Dark family of comics. Because the Dark family of comics, which we've discussed in videos 8.1 and 8.2, those are all about demons and magic and medieval sorcery and so on. So it's understandable to think that perhaps Demon Knight should be there. Well, I'm going to explain why it shouldn't. What we're looking at now is the cover for Trade Collection 1, which is called 7 Against the Dark. It contains issues 1 to 7. If we then move along, we will see here the cover for Trade Collection 2, which is called The Avalon Trap. That contains issues 8 to 12 and also issue 0. Okay? And then if we follow that line along to the very bitter end of it, just before the Forever Evil line, you'll see here the cover for volume 3 of Demon Knights, which is called The Gathering Storm. That contains issues 13 to 23, and this is the important part. It reveals that this group of heroes, the Demon Knights, is the world's first incarnation of the global protection force called Stormwatch. And Stormwatch is a major Wildstorm comic series. That's why I put Demon Knights here, because actually it's kind of like a prologue to understanding the Stormwatch line of comics. Speaking of Stormwatch, the second one up in terms of the NewStorm family is actually Stormwatch, and that's what we'll talk about now. So what you can see here is the cover for the trade collection for volume 1. This is called The Dark Side. Now, Stormwatch as a whole was initially written by Paul Cornell, and this particular series ran from 2011 to 2014. If you're a Wildstorm fan, you should really check it out. Like I say, volume 1, The Dark Side, collects issues 1 to 6. I'm then going to zoom up here to volume 2, which you'll see there. That's the cover. And this is called Enemies of Earth. Now, this one, Enemies of Earth, collects issues 7 to 12 and also Red Lantern's issue 10. Now, don't worry, those are tie-ins and not a crossover, so this volume is completely readable. Now, interestingly, this volume, volume 2, Enemies of Earth, marks the departure of the Martian Manhunter from the series. Now, for those of you that know who the Martian Manhunter is, you may have seen him on the CW show Supergirl. You might know that in the DC universe before the New 52, he was a mainstay character of every single incarnation of the Justice League. And I do mean the mainstay character. He was there even when Superman was not. However, in the New 52, he isn't part of the League. They don't mention it, they don't explain it. The only time they allude to it is once in this amazing scene from Justice League issue 8. And when they show this amazing scene, all they say is that his recruitment was attempted and went rather badly. I was always intrigued to see what they were going to do with this. Well, actually, this is where Martian Manhunter has been. He's been in Stormwatch in volume 1 and volume 2 that I've just shown you. And volume 2 is when he leaves. Personally, I collected both of the first Stormwatch volumes, mainly because I loved the Manhunter in them. And as I said, you don't need to collect the Red Lantern issues that tie in, because this is totally readable as it stands. Okay, back to the map. So we're looking at the cover for volume 2 here. I'm going to pan out and move across. And what we have is volume 3 of Stormwatch. So volume 3 is called Betrayal and collects issues 13 to 18 and issue 0. It's not very good, in part because Cornell has left by this point and been replaced by Peter Milligan. Now, this really does mark the end of this particular tone of Stormwatch, and the reason I say that is that once we cross the Forever Evil line and go here, and this is volume 4 of Stormwatch, there is a huge tonal difference. This volume is called Reset and is written by Jim Starlin. Personally, I'm not a big Jim Starlin fan anyway. This is a complete mess of an ending. It collects issues 19 to 30, so it's quite sizable. But everything about the characters is rebooted. Their look, their style, their tone, their personalities, without any explanation. And to be honest, it felt like 90s era garbage comics. I love 90s comics, but this felt like a bad example of them. So in my opinion, not good. Okay. So with that Stormwatch stuff out of the way, actually, that line doesn't seem to go anywhere for quite some time. You'll notice that all the way up until Convergence, it doesn't really go anywhere. However, what I want to do is actually just go past the Convergence line very briefly and look at the character I've just mentioned several times, which was Martian Manhunter. In the DCU, that's DCYOU initiative, there was a Martian Manhunter series released. This was written by Rob Williams, and what I'm showing you here is the cover for volume 1, which is called The Epiphany. Now, The Epiphany collects issues 1 to 6 and was incredibly strong. However, unfortunately, and there should really be a line collecting these two, sorry, that's my mistake. The next volume is volume 2, which was called The Red Rising, and that's the cover for the volume 2 paperback there. That collects the rest of the series with issues 7 to 12, and also the missing issue 5 of JLA that I mentioned way back in video 2.2. Now, just to give you an idea of what that is, remember, I'm just going to zoom out. Hopefully you're following along at home. Obviously I've zoomed out a great deal there. Let's zoom back in on the other side, and way over here, way over by the JLA section, this particular collection called Power and Glory by Brian Hitch, which we discussed in video 2.2, issue 5 of that is collected over in Manhunter. As you can imagine, that makes the whole thing a bit of a mess. Okay, so that's what I wanted to cover today, guys. I want to give you guys a bit of an explanation as to what the Wildstorm was, and I wanted to touch upon some of the major series, and we're going to cover the rest of these yellow circles in the next video. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today. As always, please like, comment, subscribe, and share more widely. As always, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. If you have anything to say, please comment below or tweet me at @IamThomasJudge. And of course, these videos are only possible thanks to supporting the channel by heading over to Amazon and picking up the first episode of my prose novel, No Gods or Kings, which is available for less than $1. It's a series of interviews from a future where superpowers are real, and the entire world has changed dramatically as a result. If you've got Kindle Unlimited, it's already free, but I still really appreciate if you download and review. For those of you that are interested in downloading the map that I'm using here for these videos, that's also available on my official website, which is nogodsorkings.com. That's also in the description below. So whilst you're there, why not pick up the first book and support the channel? Until next time, stay classy.